Welcome to our Maundy Thursday reflections. I know we very rarely have a service on Maundy Thursday, but it is a day for considering all kinds of things of where the normal becomes the holy. I've chosen 6 elements from the story of Jesus last night with his friends before mock trials and torture even, and the crucifixion, to help us to think about our everyday life and where that intersects with the life of Jesus, and how perhaps we might engage fully with this story of God become man in full humanity, and the life that he lived in front of his friends, where he took things of ordinary everyday nature and made them something rather special. I hope you will engage with these things, and if it helps you, perhaps you will get yourself some of the items that I mentioned during the reflections, so that you've got something tangible to hold on to that really roots his story into our story, his story into your story. Something to make us think about Jesus the man and what it meant for him on that Friday to face all that he faced. So, without further ado, we'll go into the reflections. I wonder what you think about your feet. A podiatrist told me last week that many medical students get bored with anatomy and they don't consider feet to be very interesting. There's a lack of podiatrists. And using exaggeration, she said to me that for an NHS foot specialist to see you, your foot needs to be nearly dangling off your leg. Feet are rarely focused on as a thing of beauty. Given the choice, most women would pick a manicure over a pedicure. Most of the time, our feet are hidden from view in boots or shoes or trainers. And it's only with summer sandals that our toes get a glimpse of the outside world. Feet are practical, our treatment of them often utilitarian. We only pay attention when there's something wrong with them. But they are our constant contact with the world, keeping us literally grounded. In the days when people walked everywhere, especially in hot countries, feet would be, and still are, sweaty, dirty and smelly. Just think of a teenage boy's trainers. Sorry, boys. If you can't, you do not know how lucky you are. Washing feet was a lowly task, a horrid job. As companions, none of the disciples had the grace or the humility to offer to wash the feet of the others before they sat or reclined to eat. The owner of the upper room was absent, and there were no servants present. They would all be uncomfortable, and the atmosphere pungent with those unwashed feet. How it must have shocked them then, when it was Jesus, who they recognised as Master, who took off his outer garment and bent, in his tunic and with the towel around his waist, to wash their feet. How inappropriate it must have seemed. Yet Jesus did it willingly. And he told them if he was willing to humble himself to do that, they must humble themselves to serve each other too. That call to serving others remains with us, and we are reminded of it by the fact that we have ministers, not priests. We are all called to act as priests, praying and interceding for others. And though we are all called to serve each other, those who we set aside are given a humble title, not an exalting one. When was the last time that you humbled yourself to serve someone else? I hope you perhaps have got yourself a snack and something to eat to represent sharing a meal. The last time I shared a meal with friends was while I was on holiday in Scotland. On the final day before I headed home, we went out for brunch at a cafe on the coast. We all had a full Scottish breakfast. It was delicious and a delight to be with the people I love and who love me. They're on the verge of retiring, and from the cafe we could look along the coast to the small town where they'll be living. And I hope we will have many more meals together, perhaps even at that cafe. I wonder though what significance that meal would take on were tragedy to strike. My memories would be of joy, but would also be clouded by the fact it was the last one. It wouldn't put me off eating a full Scottish breakfast though, and I wouldn't start to read a new significance into eggs and bacon, toast, sausage, haggis and black pudding. Eating such a breakfast would always evoke memories of sitting in winter sun on a terrace overlooking beautiful waters with my friends. Now we're in a time of distancing and our socialising doesn't involve having a meal with friends or even going out for a coffee. I wonder if we miss those things. I wonder if we'll make more effort to spend time with friends over a meal or coffee in the future. Whether we'll pay attention to the significance of such an apparently small thing. Take time to ponder. Who would you most like to have a meal with right now? Who would you like to go out for a drink with? Whose company are you missing? Can there really be a message from God in these feelings of loss, however momentary they are? I don't know if you have enough bread in the house that you've got yourself a slice or a bread roll in front of you now as we make this reflection together. But it's about Jesus breaking bread during that meal he had with his friends. One of the things that makes me slightly sad as I go around Sainsbury's at the moment is that one of the products axed for their slimmed down product range during times of COVID was the cheese topped rolls. Despite bread being the great British staple carbohydrate, along with potato, I've never really been a bread lover. Bread may be described as the staff of life, but most of the time I could easily live without it. Having a bit of cheese on top, or buying a loaf with seeds or nuts in it, is one way I can persuade myself to eat it. Yet for most of history, and for much of the world, bread is still the basic food to sustain the poor. Jesus once said, "Man shall not live by bread alone," but he did recognise the value of bread for physical nourishment. Marie Antoinette will forever be remembered for advising peasants who were rioting because of a rise of tax on flour to eat an alternative with less wheat. "Let them eat brioche," she said. Unleavened bread was a significant part of the Passover meal because it reminded the Jewish people that they had left Egypt in such a hurry that there was no time to let bread rise. So Jesus broke bread at the Last Supper. It was common for all those eating together to tear chunks off shared breads. Breaking bread only showed people were companions, which literally means those who eat bread with you. Jesus put new meaning into breaking bread though. "This is my body broken for you." We are the body of Christ. I wonder this year, as we hold our services broken into individual homes, whether there's a new significance for us as church in breaking bread. What does it mean that the body of Christ is broken into fragments scattered through neighbourhoods? Are we finding a new way to bring nourishment and sustenance to our neighbours? Within the rules of physical distancing, are there any ways that we can offer hope and faith and love? As we move into this reflection about pouring wine, I wonder if perhaps you've still got something to drink in front of you from the reflection about sharing meals. Some of you will know that I don't drink wine. I've been fortunate that most of the churches I've attended since I stopped drinking alcohol, aged 21, have used non-alcoholic wine or a red-coloured substitute. I do sometimes have my breath taken away if, unawares, I have a mouthful of real wine at communion. Probably, in the time of Jesus, I would not have made that choice to give up. Water was often dangerous to drink, carrying diseases and sometimes parasites. Adding alcohol to water killed the bacteria and parasites. So people commonly drank watered wine to prevent disease. And you may remember that Paul commended wine to Timothy for its medicinal properties. Take a little wine for your stomach, he said. In Psalm 104, in the midst of praising God for making the earth fruitful, the writer praises God for vines that mean we can make wine to make us happy. Wine has all kinds of significance. At the Last Supper, though, Jesus poured out red wine and gave it new significance. In the Old Testament, making a covenant or agreement was marked by sacrificing animals. Blood was shed to show the serious nature of the agreement. Indeed, the Hebrew phrase for making a covenant literally means to cut a covenant. Jesus was ushering in the new covenant between God and humanity. Blood was going to be shed, his own. No longer would sacrifices of animals, with their blood poured over the altar, be required for people to be put right with God. Jesus did not want a reminder of his shed blood that involved further bloodshed. So he took the cup and said, "This is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for the forgiveness of sin." Do you come to God and confess so that your sin is forgiven? Or do you try to hide it away, deny it, or deal with it yourself? Just as wine freely flows from the bottle to the cup, so Jesus freely poured out his blood. Don't deny yourself the gift he offers today. We're on to our reflection about the garden. I don't know what you might have picked to symbolise this for you. Maybe a hand tool, or perhaps some foliage or a flower from your own garden if you're fortunate enough to have one. In the Bible, the human story starts in a garden. Everything was absolutely as it should be until Adam and Eve chose to disobey God and eat the forbidden fruit. They were exiled from the garden, and life became hard as the affected creation threw up weeds and thistles alongside crops for food. And childbirth became difficult and literally labour or work. Our word paradise has come into English from the Arabic word for garden. Many people think of paradise as the destination for good people after death, but that's a much more Islamic idea than a biblical one. The Bible talks about the New Jerusalem, a renewed city where God will once again walk and meet face to face with his people. There will be trees there whose leaves will bring healing to the nations, but it's definitely a city, not a garden. The English famously love their gardens, so please don't look at mine as an example. But the gardens where Jesus went on the night of his betrayal were nothing like an English garden with flower beds, lawns, and perhaps a pond or arbour. This garden was a space for growing olives. Indeed, the name Gethsemane is derived from the word for oil press. The garden is not a place of delight, but a place of anguish. It's a place of peace, quite enough for the disciples to fall asleep, but also of struggle. Jesus' struggle to submit to the Father's will, the struggle of the soldiers to arrest him, the struggle with and giving in to fear for the disciples. Maybe COVID isolation means your garden is looking tip-top, but next time you look out of your window, can you see it as a place of trouble or danger or betrayal? I have to say, as a single person, I really struggled to think of something I could use to symbolise our final reflection, but perhaps you can. It's a reflection on the kiss. If you like art, then the words "the kiss" may very well bring two pieces to mind: a sculpture by Rodin and a painting by Klimt that both have that title. Each of those works shows a couple passionately entwined as they embrace and kiss one another. In modern times, and in a sexualised age, perhaps this is the most immediate image to spring to mind when we hear that phrase too. If we think about it though, there are all kinds of other kisses. The goodnight kisses of parents and children, the courtly gentleman's kiss of the hand of a favoured lady, the peck on the cheek of goodbye as a spouse goes off to work, or the kiss of greeting between friends. In our adoption into God's family, we become sisters and brothers, and Paul rightly tells us to greet one another with a brotherly or sisterly kiss. We usually think of kisses as something warm and positive, and in our isolation we may well miss the kisses of friends, relatives and our church family. Yet the kiss of Maundy Thursday is of a very different kind. A Judas kiss is not positive, is not warm, is certainly not loving. To identify Jesus in the dark of the garden, Judas kisses him. It marks Jesus out. It becomes the kiss of death. For all those of us who love Jesus, we might do well to pause and reflect on whether sometimes we betray Jesus too, whether we mark Jesus with the kiss of death. Certainly, as the song puts it, it was my sin that kept him there, that is, on the cross. Maybe my betrayal or yours is not as obvious as that of Judas. It certainly isn't recorded in the Bible with our name attached. Yet perhaps it's right that our final thought this Thursday is on how we contributed to the path that led Jesus to his death, so that as we move into Friday, our focus is where it should be, on the righteous one of God taking on our unrighteousness, the one who was without sin becoming sin, the one who death could not hold, tasting our death and defeating it, in order that death could no longer have any hold on us.